Philosophers talk to our times. Living in a post-enlightenment society. As we enter into this new dark age of post-enlightened thinking, it's worth going through what it was the Enlightenment did. And by this I probably mean mostly Kant. What it did to knowledge and what is being undone. Because it is only in understanding that you can understand what will be the effect of undoing the Enlightenment. Because it won't be a new dark age, or not quite the same way. And yet it has features of it. So what was it the Enlightenment did? In his masterwork, Critic of Pure Reason, which is a book that is not as bad as it sounds, the second half is actually very, very funny. In it, Kant orchestrates the great debates of reason, where he proves reason can't prove the existence of anything, be it God or the infinite divisibility of space. It has no way of deciding because it doesn't exist that way. And he says that because in the first bit of the book, he solved, for his own satisfaction, exactly how perception happened. I can have an order in the world that is objective and concepts that are not merely bundles of ideas, as Hume would have them, Kant says, and very famously, if, in order to be able to perceive at all, I have to create the order. So that the order, logic, a world that conforms to reason, is the price I pay for being able to see it at all, to be able to understand it at all. To achieve this very audacious, and it isn't a very audacious move, Kant makes another one. He takes time and changes the concept of it totally in two ways that is very hard to row back from. And yet. So how does he change it? First of all, he makes time an inner sense. Time is the corollary of space. We perceive space always on the outside, but we always live our time. Our time, then, is something we construct in order to pattern and to understand space and the way the world that is beyond us appears within us. Okay? So that once time becomes an inner sense, of course I have no access to the world beyond time. There must be a world of things in themselves. Later philosophers got rather upset and worried and wanted to investigate these things in themselves. But of course, Descartes has them as well. Certainly Spinoza has them. So you don't want to go too far down that path, if you want my opinion. Much, much more interesting is what Kant does to the perception of time. And this is what reason does to the perception of time. He turns it around. The image before, unless you accept some of my more ambitious rewrites of 17th and 18th century philosophers. So with their partial exception, because I would actually argue there had been a different temporal revolution after Descartes and before Spinoza. But that's a different matter. So unless you accept that kind of argument, what Kant is doing to time, which was by this a very old and very established principle, is utterly, utterly remarkable. He is shining the torchlight of time in the opposite direction. You see, Aristotle, image of time, was as a potentially divisible, infinitely divisible sequence of nows. What he meant was then, as you moved no doubt continuously, and you passed through all the points you moved through, but you didn't stop there. There was no rest. You were only potentially there because you always passed on to the next. You always passed on to the next. So far, time was certainly based on movement and going forward. But, Aristotle says, the image for time is that at each one of those places you are, you could insert a division, divide it, and you would be there. And that would be the now that you were there, because you could always stop. So that time goes through a sequence of potential divisibilities, nows. These nows are always the first moment of the past, never the last moment of the future. Time, as he understands it then, is always running backwards. You look, you see, and the light is firmly behind you. But the future, the light is in front of you. In The Critique of Pure Reason, Kant says that our perception has to be understood as that snatch that takes you to the future, that runs through and holds together perceptions. That means nothing is ever finished, complete. That one perception beats upon the next, beats upon the next, beats upon the next. In order to have a mind that is open, then, we have one that endlessly flees to the future. Now, in this, I think Kant is more remarkable than his interpreters. He sometimes gets interpreted as saying almost exactly the same as Aristotle, but he clearly isn't. Apprehension is the move to the future, the snatch to the future. It is then accompanied by another element of the initial impact. Kant would call these transcendental imaginations, by the way, that creates the past. So you move to the future, but you retain the movement. Time is thereby created, and the past is patterned. It is only once you've got the future that is endlessly open and past that you can begin to have the concepts of understanding whirling around, and they form concepts that pattern times into causations, cause and effect, or just community. So are you standing in a room looking around, or is a river flowing? It does all of that once it has received the impressions of the future and the past. I hope that wasn't too complicated, but that's fundamentally all the real nitty-gritty Kant we're doing. By changing then time so that nothing is ever finished, effectively Kant does so many moves. First of all, he stops God being able to intervene in the world that we create. If a God did intervene, if it didn't conform to the rules of space and time, we either wouldn't perceive it, or we would perceive it as something that we were already. There is a partial exception at the end of Kant, and I'm going to come to that at the end, which is the sublime, so I do know. Okay? But by and large, God can't intervene. In the Aristotelian method, there was nothing stopping a God who always looked backwards as well, saying, well, now we're going to do this way, and everything could change. In the Kantian, you can't do that. The triumph then of reason and its critique is to exclude divinity and fixed theology in the world. In order to explain anything then, within the Kant system, it takes time. I always think it's very interesting when you hit somebody with a fact, how they react to it. My standard reaction when hit by something I don't know is silence, because I'm thinking about it. And I'm thinking about how it links to everything that I do know. And I'm wondering whether it's a finished fact, or whether I've simply got to wait and wait and wait for other things to emerge so that I can build a proper concept. One of the things a post-enlightenment society tries to make you do is to decide straight away. Everything must always have a decision. You say, oh, that's because of that, it's because of that. And that's because you're not thinking time as Kant wants you to think it, as the Enlightenment demands, requires you to think it, as you that are inside it, where you actually have to think about things, and things emerge across a time. They're not just revealed in a moment. More than that, Kant, of course, creates, and here I'm moving slightly into Deleuze, a concept of time that is very remarkable. Because that flight to the future can't comprehend itself. Although you can always apprehend, you can always move into the next, into the next, into the next. The act of retention, holding the past, is limited. If time then tries to understand itself, that ability to hold one past collapses. Kant calls that the sublime. And the sublime is that moment of something that can only be understood in reason breaks into perception, and perception itself breaks. Or to put it another way, to understand time itself, you can't be gathered into a single strand of time. It is rather that, insofar as it relates to an ever-opening future, that breaks the strands of time. Or if you like, time transcends itself. It's very quick, very easy then to go from that model, from a Kantian model, where time is always a run to a future, to a Deleuzian model, where time is defined by ideas that hold myriad futures. And as time runs forward, it changes the universe, it wanders across the universe it is, so that time itself sets us free in the dark. So what does Kant want to remind you in all of this? Kant, much more than Bergson, and as much as Leibniz, always gives you the same counsel. If you're trying to decide something, if you are forming an idea, and we all form ideas and concepts all the time, do not be over-hurried in the forming of that idea. Lights come on in time. It's okay to stay in the dark. It's okay to say you don't know. Faced with crushing conspiracies that solve things so very quickly, what enlightenment reminds you is saying, I don't know. Really, I don't know. Is sometimes the most important and freeing thing you can ever do.